Okay, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate you being here for this very meaningful tribute, important tribute to Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, Zichrono Livracha. It's hard to even say that word, Zichrono Livracha. When talking about such a man who made an impact upon our world, it's really hard to imagine that he's no longer here with us. Even 4 weeks after his passing, it's hard to imagine our world without Rabbi Sacks. It's hard to imagine how anyone can really fill the particular role that he played. It's hard to imagine who will be able to tackle the ideas that he did in the way that he did, and who will be able to find the eloquence with which to address the Shivim Panim La Torah, the 70 different faces of the Torah, the 70 different facets of the Torah, the depths of the Torah, and use those facets to frame the multitude of situations that we face in our complex world. The hundreds of tributes and articles and Zoom conferences about Rabbi Sacks over the last few weeks from all around the world have been almost overwhelming. There have been so many that they've only further enhanced my appreciation for Rabbi Sacks and have really only increased my understanding of just how big a void it is that he left behind. In addition to those inspiring worldwide tributes, and there's another notable one tomorrow being presented by Rabbi Sacks' own foundation, institution, which everyone is welcome to take part in, we felt it was also important to have this internal gathering, to gather with our own shul in this smaller setting, to mark the occasion, to reflect upon the loss, and to note the impact that he made on us, and specifically to hear the more intimate perspectives of those from our own community. Thank you so much to Jeremy Brown for arranging this important gathering tonight, conceiving of the idea and reaching out to the speakers and putting it all together. I also want to thank Jeremy and Erica Brown, as well as Ted Rosenbaum, for planning another tribute to Rabbi Sacks, which you're going to find out about this week. It's going to be a sort of KMS book club event surrounding Rabbi Sacks' newest book, Morality. We're going to be releasing details in the coming days. There'll be a way to have a bulk order. You'll be getting the book. We hope to be able to have everyone read the book and then have a culminating event in February where we'll be able to have further discussion and speakers surrounding the important topics contained therein. Chazal say in Maseches Kalo Rabasi, Tanu Rabbanan, B'shas Ptiras Chacham Kol Ha'am Chayavin Behespedo. When a Chacham dies, everyone is obligated to eulogize him. Some of us knew Rabbi Sacks personally. Some of us may not have known him at all. And perhaps all of us felt like we knew him in some way because we were exposed to so much of his thinking and his writing over the course of years. But whether or not we knew him personally, he was a chacham, he was a giant, he was a one-of-a-kind figure that shaped our world. And therefore, kol ha'am chayavin behespedo. All of us are obligated to pause and to mourn, to pause and to reflect, to pause and to give thanks, and to pause and pay tribute to this Adam Gadol, to this outstanding leader. In an old essay on Parshas Vayishlach, speaking about the struggle of Yaakov with the angel, Rabbi Sacks says, Jacob/Israel has bequeathed us many gifts, but few more valuable than the obstinacy and resilience that can face hard times and say, I will not let you go until you bless me. I will not give up or move on until I have extracted something positive from this pain and turned it into blessing. Tonight we gather because we struggle. We struggle with the loss of a leader and teacher. Tonight we gather to use words and speeches to give expression to that loss and help us find direction. But tonight we also gather because we wish to continue to learn from the life of a great man and his teachings even after he is gone from this world. And tonight, if each of us can learn something from his life, can be inspired to do more, and can aspire to achieve even a small part of his greatness, then we will truly have tapped into the resilience of Yaakov and will have truly extracted something positive from this pain which we feel and turned it, in the words of Rabbi Sacks, into blessing. I'm honored to be joined this evening by a few individuals who can share reflections on different facets of Rabbi Sacks' teachings, his noble life and character, and his contribution to our world. It's a special privilege to be able to begin our program tonight by calling upon Rabbi Bieler.
Yes. Hi. Nice to see everyone, and hope that everyone is doing well in this very difficult time. I first met Rabbi Sachs when Joni and I visited London in 1989. I got to attend a conference at that time on modern orthodoxy, and Rabbi Sachs encouraged me to publish one of my papers in the Jewish College Journal, Le'ela, at that time. I also recall Rabbi Sachs's first visit to KMS and the stimulating Friday night dinner at Erica and Jeremy's. On my blog, I've usually written once a week about one of Rabbi Sachs's weekly internet essays, and I counted of late over 240 that summarize and discuss his work. I've also reviewed many of his books for the Jewish Book Council, including his last published work, Morality, Restoring the Common Good in Divided Times, which it sounds like you are going to be reading. What always deeply impressed me about Rabbi Sachs was the key characteristic that he seems to have shared with my other primary Torah teachers, Rabbi Soloveitchik, Nechama Leibowitz, Rav Lichtenstein, and Rav Lichtenstein. Not only did they all reflect deep understanding and appreciation of Jewish sources, but also profound humanism and humanity. And I believe that each derived such a perspective from their respective distinctive personalities, intellectual brilliance, devotion to Torah, and their excellent classical educations in philosophy or literature. None of these individuals were ever embarrassed to call upon their secular learning with great frequency. And not only did they reference Limudei Chol sources, they often conducted a dialogue between these sources and Jewish primary texts, something that I found eminently attractive about their respective approaches to thinking and learning. They were living role models of Torah and Nada. In fall of 2010, the OU publication Jewish Action's lead story was Jews Without Borders, including the educational backgrounds of the individuals written about. An interview with Rabbi Sachs also appeared in this issue of the magazine, suggesting that he too was to be considered a Jew without borders. His educational experiences, aside from his attending Jews college, were highly secular. St. Mary's Primary School, Christ College, Finchley, Gonville, Caius College, Cambridge, New College, Oxford, and King's College, London. The educations of the Rav, Nechama, and Rav Aaron also included major stints in non-Jewish settings. I have often wondered whether anyone lacking the type of education that involved concerted exposure to non-Jews could have achieved what these individuals managed to accomplish over the course of their great efforts, and develop similar sensibilities that informed their overall lives. Much to my regret, it appears that in the observant Jewish world, not only studying the humanities is not considered as desirable or practical as it once apparently was, but that a university education has lost some of its cachet as well. Of course, I think that Rabbi Sachs reflected a major departure from the others I mentioned in terms of his devotion to interfaith education and religious tolerance. By many accounts, Rabbi Sachs' masterpiece in this area was his book, The Dignity of Difference. On page 55 of the original version of the book, Rabbi Sachs writes that his hypothesis was based upon a comment of the Netziv regarding the Tower of Babel, the tipping point between the Bible's initial universalism and eventual particularism states, in the course of history, God has spoken to mankind in many languages, through Judaism to Jews, Christianity to Christians, Islam to Muslims. Only such a God is truly transcendental, greater than not only the natural universe, but also than the spiritual universe articulated in any single faith, any specific language of human sensibility. How can a sacred text convey such an idea? It would declare that God is God for all humanity, that no single faith is or should be the faith of all humanity. Unfortunately, statements such as these seem to always inspire great opposition and pushback. Rabbi Sachs was even threatened with excommunication were he not to retract his views. In order to attempt to calm these individuals down, revisions were made in the book's subsequent editions. The paragraph that I just read was altered as follows. As Jews, we believe that God has made a covenant with a singular people, but that this does not exclude the possibility of other peoples, cultures, and faiths finding their own relationships with God within the shared frame of the Noahide laws. These laws constitute, as it were, the depth grammar of the human experience of the divine, of what it is to see the world as God's work and humanity as God's image. God is the God of all humanity, but between Babel and the end of days, no single faith is the faith of all humanity. It seems to me, thankfully, so that Rabbi Sachs's views remained unaltered, despite these editorial revisions necessitated by individuals who did not share this vision. In addition to his radical theological views, as articulated in The Dignity of Difference and evidenced by his extensive interfaith work, Rabbi Sachs was someone who valued being widely read, another dimension that obviously appealed to me, and referenced many diverse sources from fields such as psychology, history, anthropology, biology, economics, government, business leadership, etc., in his many books and essays. I deeply believe that a synergistic relationship exists, particularly for those who have studied philosophy and or literature, between the likes of Plato, Aristotle, Dante, Shakespeare, Tennyson, and Frost on the one hand, and the Tanaim, Amoraim, Rishonim, and Achronim on the other. While the rabbis make a clear distinction between the Chachmei Torah and the Chachmei Umot Olam, they also strongly contend that if someone tells you that Chachma, wisdom, is to be found in secular works, one should take this seriously and believe such a contention. Rabbi Sachs obviously did. Finally, I was struck by one of Rabbi Sachs's observations in his 1981 Parshat HaShavua essay for Vayetze, also published in his book Lessons in Leadership, entitled Light in Dark Times. Speaking, in my view, autobiographically, of the necessity to be flexible and to live a life of risks, Rabbi Sachs quotes from Teddy Roosevelt's speech entitled Citizenship in a Republic, given at the Sorbonne in April 1910. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. I thought upon reading this citation how similar it is to something that Shlomo HaMelech says in Kohelet, Ki Adam ein tzadik ba'aretz asher ya'aseh tov v'lo yachta. There is no righteous person in the world who does only good and never sins. John Milton wrote in the Areopagitica, I cannot praise a fugitive and cloistered virtue, unexercised and unbreathed, that never sallies forth until and sees her adversary, but slinks out of the race where that immortal garland is to be run for, not without dust and heat. As well as what Coach John Thompson, outstanding Georgetown basketball coach, often used to repeat, that you have to be on the court and play in order to voice an opinion about the sport. It is deep, inspiring privilege to have been able to engage, and through his writings continue to engage, with Rabbi Sachs regarding these many themes that his obviously restless, curious, and creative mind explored, thought about, and attempted to actuate throughout the work.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Bieler, for that fascinating and important presentation. The Teddy Roosevelt quote is one that I love, and I've seen many people quote it, but I've always felt when I see Rabbi Sachs quote it, it has a different feel to it, and I think you brought that up tonight based on who he was and what he represented. So thank you so much for those words. Our next speaker, we are honored to call upon Sharon Ferndell, whose remarks are actually pre-recorded, and so I will share that with you right now.
I want to thank Rabbi Weinberg and the KMS community for giving me this opportunity to speak a little bit about Rabbi Sachs. I had the privilege and honor of developing a deep, meaningful relationship with Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs when I was Rebbetzin of Kesher, Israel. He joined us for many meals, sometimes accompanied by his wonderful wife, Elaine. Much has already been said in praise of Rabbi Sachs. What I at least have heard most about is his erudition, his scholarship, his worldview, and his ability to communicate decency, dignity, and morality in edifying and inspiring ways. I'd like to reflect on three other aspects of Rabbi Sacks's life: his ability to tell stories with an archetype British dry wit, his love of words and their usage, and his utmost kindness. Rabbi Sacks was a raconteur extraordinaire. He could tell a story and have the audience hang on every single word, whether that audience was composed of 300 or 300 people. I remember once his regaling us around the Shabbat table with the time that he was invited to 10 Downing Street, the home of the Prime Minister, for a state dinner. When the Prime Minister's people invited him, he explained that he only ate kosher food and would therefore require a special meal. He fully expected that this would be some sort of prepackaged dinner that he himself would be required to open to assure the contents had remained untouched. Well, the staff at 10 Downing Street went all out, and in order to assure that the chief rabbi did not feel singled out, they ordered kosher food for all the heads of government, the members of the House of Lords and the House of Commons. To paraphrase Rabbi Sacks, you have never seen anything quite as comical as stiff-lipped British aristocracy and nobility attempting to open a double shrink-wrapped meal with grace and aplomb. The mental image he created in my mind still brings a smile to my face. Rabbi Sacks loved words, not only in order to communicate his thoughts and ideas, but words as entities unto themselves. I remember having a long conversation with him when his Koran Siddur first came out about the phrase in Birkot Shema, the blessings surrounding the Shema prayer. V'chulam mikablim aleihem ol malchut shamayim zeh mizeh v'notnim reshut zeh lazeh. All of the angels accept upon themselves, one from the other, the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, granting permission to one another. And here was the question of the poetry and the prayer. Rabbi Sacks has the tefillah split as follows: Lahagdish liotzram, benachat ruach, bisafa verura uveneima, kedusha kulam ke'echad, onim v'omrim b'yirah. To sanctify the one who formed them in serene spirit, pure speech and sweet melody, all as one proclaim his holiness, saying in awe, Kadosh, 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 holy, holy, holy. I believed, and I still believe for parallelism reasons, that it should read, Lahagdish liotzram, benachat ruach, bisafa verura, uveneima kedosha, kulam ke'echad, onim v'omrim b'yirah. To sanctify the one who formed them in serene spirit, pure speech, and sweet and holy melody. All as one answer, saying in awe, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. He finally explained to me that he had done wide-ranging research on the more common construct, and that was what was reflected in his Siddur. Then with a twinkle in his eye, he directed me to page 1237 of his Siddur, where in fact there is a list of textual variants with their alternate translations, legitimatizing what I had so eloquently argued was the correct girsah, the correct version, a fact that he knew all along while I was busy articulating my position. Getting the words right was so important to him that he placed an addendum in his Siddur with variations in the text to assure that all of the accepted bases were covered. Finally, he was a kind and caring man, not only on paper, as reflected in his many books ranging from The Dignity of Difference to Not in God's Name to his final work, Morality, but in real life also. At one point, I had written him a letter about some existential issues I was having. I was shocked and surprised when I never heard back from him, something that I would not have expected. When we followed up with him, it turned out that he in fact had never received the letter. He then spent a great deal of time with me working through my existential questions and actually followed up with me to make sure I was getting on well in my life. It floors me that someone universally known in the Jewish world and one of the most widely recognized Jewish personalities globally would take time to check in on such a relatively minor player in his life. And that was the man that he was. I can only hope that his passing during these most tumultuous times means that God knew that the Jewish people are currently in dire need of a Militz Yosher, an honest and eloquent defender of the Jewish people and of all humanity. May we all carry on the legacy that Rabbi Sacks leaves behind and strive to heal our fractured world.
Wow, Sharon, thank you so much for those beautiful words and for sharing that perspective and that side of Rabbi Sacks. I continue to still have a smile on my face from the story of the kosher food opening, and I know I'll remember that for a long time, so we very much appreciate it. Our next speaker tonight, I'm so honored to call upon Nathan Diamond to share a few words as well.
Good evening, Shlo Tov. Speaking to a KMS audience in honor of the memory of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, there's one image with which I must begin. It is from one of the wonderful occasions upon which Rabbi Sacks came to KMS, which I was honored and happy to help arrange. It was the book signing portion of the visit, at which, of course, we were offering Rabbi Sacks's latest work for sale. I had never arranged a book signing before, so it did not occur to me, and frankly, I was most chagrined when all the wonderful members of KMS lined up not only to purchase the latest book, but had emptied their shelves of all of the Rabbi Jonathan Sacks books that they owned, so that Rabbi Sacks would not only sign a copy of or two of his latest book, but each person's shelf full of Jonathan Sacks books. What I was most worried about, of course, was that Rabbi Sacks's hand would fall off from all the signing, which, by the way, I asked him if he wanted me to announce that he would only be signing a new book, and he declined doing that, and he sat with great patience and perseverance, signing all of your books. Upon reflection in this moment, we can hold that image up as a testament to how deeply Rabbi Sacks and his Torah connected to and inspires the KMS community. Since this community is so familiar, I think, with Rabbi Sacks's teachings and writings, and since I was confident that other speakers would insightfully speak about the depth of Rabbi Sacks's intellectual legacy, I thought I would briefly share what glimpses I can, like Sharon, about Rabbi Sacks's humanity and lessons we can draw for our own lives from that as well. Because what's often overlooked is that for all his prowess and sophistication of philosophy and parshanut, Rabbi Sacks also focused his teaching and his life on fundamental aspects of the human condition. Indeed, that is the overriding theme of his last book, Morality, as you will soon see. Rabbi Sacks devoted much attention to the basic human needs for happiness, community, friendship, and connection. And I was privileged to see him model behavior that yielded lessons in addressing these essential needs. On each of the two Shabbatot that Rabbi Sacks spent with us at KMS, there was a simcha. On the first, it was the bar mitzvah of Yosef Eisenstadt, and on the second, it was the bat mitzvah of Grace Kennedy. And even though Rabbi Sacks was our esteemed scholar in residence, he would not interfere with the KMS practice of each of those young adults delivering a Dvar Torah from the pulpit at the end of Musaf. Rabbi Sacks spoke after Kiddush. We didn't have to worry about people coming back after Kiddush in his case. But indeed, he made sure to open his remarks to the hundreds in attendance with appreciation for the Divrei Torah delivered by Yosef and Grace, respectively. He also, I can tell you, spent a bit of time privately with each of them. He presented each with a small gift of a siddur, And in Yosef's case, I recall he shared some very empathetic words as Yosef's grandfather passed away just days before his bar mitzvah. I could tell just by being an eavesdropper standing by that from the looks on the faces of Yosef and of Grace, that the time taken by the renowned Rabbi Sachs to speak with each of them on their special Shabbat had a massive impact on each of them, indeed. They make these little incidents make so vivid, I think, so much of Rabbi Sachs's teachings to us about the power and potential of acts of chesed. As well, when Rabbi Sachs would come to Washington, I would also facilitate meetings for him with national policymakers, members of Congress, members of the administration, past administrations, and the like. I will share with you that over the years, I've seen many leaders of various religious communities in such meetings, and it is disappointingly the case that some of these religious leaders speak to those with political power in ways that are not entirely consistent with their religious commitments. They find themselves intimidated by the politically powerful, or they find themselves wishing to ingratiate themselves to those office holders. In Rabbi Sachs's meetings, that was never the case. He offered his perspective on the issues of the day in these private meetings, just as he would on the BBC or in a Times essay, and he did so in a voice that was anchored in the authenticity of Torah teachings and values. This too, I think, is for all of us in each of our lives, in our own ways, a model to be mindful of. Finally, I want to conclude with something I mentioned in an essay that I wrote in Rabbi Sachs's memory on the Lair House website that fits here as well. Part of Rabbi Sachs's humanity, Sharon Ferndell listed a few aspects, his appreciation for words and the like. Also part of Rabbi Sachs's, I guess, raconteur personality, to use Sharon's word, was his appreciation for jokes. He typically opened his sermons and lectures with a joke. Indeed, in his 2000 book, Celebrating Life, he explained why. He said, "I like jokes because they are unserious ways of saying serious things. They get past our defenses. What we can laugh at, we can face." One joke that I'm quite certain he actually told at KMS was of a Mr. Finkelstein going to Massachusetts General Hospital where he was treated for an illness for a week. And then without explanation, Finkelstein had himself transferred to a rundown hospital on the Lower East Side of New York. The doctor at this second hospital, intrigued, asked Finkelstein what was wrong with Massachusetts General. Was it the doctors? Finkelstein replied, "The doctors were great, I can't complain." Was it the nurses? Asked the doctor. Finkelstein replied, "The nurses were attentive, I can't complain." The doctor asked, "Was it the food?" Finkelstein replied, "The food was amazing." "So why did you even come here?" asked the doctor. Finkelstein replied, "Because here I can complain." Rabbi Sachs, as noted, explained that what we can laugh at, we can face. And we are saddened today and not laughing at the fact that he has passed on to the next world, that Ribono Shel Olam has called him home, and that we had so much more to learn from him had he stayed with us for longer. I think the key to overcoming this state of sadness is to reflect on what Rabbi Sachs's daughter Gila shared in her eulogy for her father. She said that Rabbi Sachs, as her father, imbued in her and her siblings the mindset that no problem is too big for people to solve. Some problems are easier, some are harder, but we are charged to strive to change the world and make it better. And we should not view any challenge or any problem as insurmountable. Indeed, her father surely used the joke about Finkelstein to make the point. There's no purpose to complaining about problems. We have to find a way to tackle them. We can't overcome the reality of Rabbi Sachs having passed away, but we can keep his Torah alive by continuing to study it and continuing to try to incorporate into our lives the life lessons and the engagement with humanity as a legacy that Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs leaves with each of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan, for those wonderful words, and especially for all your efforts over the years to bring Rabbi Sachs to KMS, and specifically tonight for bringing out that side of him in terms of his visits and his connection to KMS, which I know everyone here on this call tonight and beyond will certainly cherish. It's a great privilege and honor to be able to round out tonight's speakers with our very own Erica Brown with some special reflections on a teacher and a mentor, which she saw in Rabbi Sachs. Erica.
Thank you, Rabbi Weinberg. Shavua Tov, everyone. In Shmot Rabbah, Rabbi Yehuda bar Nachman said in the name of Shimon ben Lakish that when Moshe wrote the Torah, a drop of ink was left over in the quill, and he waved it over his head, and it became the rays of glory, as it says, O Moshe lo yada ki karan or panav b'dabro ito. Moshe was not aware that the skin of his face was radiant since he had spoken with him. When Rabbi Sachs wrote, it is as if he took ink, spread it over the world, and it became rays of glory. He looked at current trends and events through the lens of Jewish teaching and gave us a way to think about the most confounding problems of our time using ancient wisdom, modern philosophy, sociology, and economics on the breakdown of morality, the impact of loneliness, the importance of community, religious violence, the value of marriage and the family, anti-Semitism, the integration of immigrants, the struggles of leadership. He cited Hobbes, Locke, Adam Smith, Charles Taylor, Alistair McIntyre, and a glittering series of other authors as if they were old friends. But the difference between him and so many other scholars is that he wasn't doing it to make him sound smart. He distilled difficult concepts so that when you read his work, you felt smart. Some called him the moral voice of Britain. It was he, a rabbi, who would be consulted by government officials, prime ministers, princes, economists, and CEOs for his moral counsel. Everywhere he went, he created those rays of glory, using Jewish texts and values to help repair the world's ills. I was fortunate to have a front seat to take in those rays of glory from 1988 to 1990, years before Rabbi Sachs became chief rabbi. And in 1989, I met Rabbi Bieler for the first time at the same Traditional Alternatives conference. We lived only a block away from Jews College, where he served as a principal, and I was a faculty member coordinating 2 programs of the college. I also had no idea how to drive, and certainly was not going to risk my life driving on the other side of the road, so the college became, in effect, a second home. Rabbi Sachs was my master's thesis advisor. I sat in on dozens of his classes and lectures, and when he addressed the community in virtually any capacity, we would try to attend. Each class felt like a work of art, a great sweep of Western thought brought to bear on his reading of a text. He had tremendous energy and passion and always seemed grander than the space. I taught frequently in his shul on Shabbat and some holidays, and his wife, Elaine, studied with me at that time. He encouraged me to study for my doctorate, and in his words, encouraged me to take my teachings as far as possible in Limud Torah. I learned how to be a Jewish educator by observing him in those early years. I watched how he composed his classes, how he used texts, how he communicated hope. People left his classes feeling better about themselves and the world. His was not cheap inspiration. It was delivered with deep content and sophistication. While most refer to his writing, I have been singularly dazzled by his reading. I learned how to be a disciplined reader from watching Rabbi Sachs. According to his brother Alan, Rabbi Sachs read a book a day. During Shiva, Alan was asked, what book would you be surprised to find on your brother's shelf? And Alan said, no book would surprise me. Rabbi Sachs read widely and was always up on the literature. While the same themes appear repeatedly in his books, the difference between covenants and contracts, the I versus the we, self-help versus self-sacrifice, he always brought new research and new literature to his themes because he was an intense reader. He understood that in order to have immense output, you need immense input. He was just never ordinary. Alan reported that at 16, Rabbi Sachs went to the beach on a family holiday in a tweed jacket and tie. When he decided to be a rabbi, he put his considerable intelligence to the test, as he had not been brought up in a Jewishly knowledgeable household. He had spiritual ambition until the very last weeks of his life. The Midrash I quoted says something else of great importance. A drop of ink was left over in the quill. Rav Soloveitchik's understanding of this Midrash is cited in Nefesh Harav. Quote, every great person, however much is written in his books and however much he lectures and discourses publicly, the majority of his teachings will remain with him. Rabbi Sachs left me, and the majority of his teachings we will not know. In these past weeks, I've been in touch with Elaine, his daughter Gila, his son Josh, his niece, and his brother. They've been deeply moved by the global outpour of consolation. I've spoken with people who were close by his side in the office. The grief is everywhere. Like many of you, I've watched tributes and reread some of his older writings and finished his latest book, Morality. But above and beyond, I've tried to understand why this has hit me so hard. I find myself weepy and at odd times. And why is it that people who never met Rabbi Sacks reached out to me to share that they have cried over this loss? I think we all know on some deeply personal level that by virtue of his dignity, he brought dignity to Judaism, to our Torah, to what we treasure most, to our lives. He made us feel dignified. And in his memory, I thought I'd share a little story about dignity told to me by one of his close colleagues. Whenever this employee would speak badly about someone, Rabbi Sacks would look at him and say one word, dignity, and his colleague would stop. Rabbi Sacks reminded all of us in his sweeping, majestic writings and his small personal interactions that we are created by God with dignity and that we must rise to it always. Yeh Zichro Baruch.
Thank you so much, Erica, for those really tremendous words to round out our program. I think through your deep connection, we all feel a little bit more connected to Rabbi Sacks, and we really appreciate that and feel very fortunate to have had that connection through you tonight. So thank you. A lot of beautiful words tonight. Thank you all for those amazing words. You've all deepened my appreciation for Rabbi Sacks and have rounded out my understanding of this Adam Gadol in an all new way. I'd like to end tonight's program actually by listening to the powerful words of Rabbi Sacks himself. Back in May, Rabbi Sacks lost his beloved teacher, Rav Nachum Rabinovich. At the end of his hesped for Rav Rabinovich, Rabbi Sacks reflects upon what it means to lose a teacher. And I could think of no more fitting words to close with tonight than Rabbi Sacks's own words on what it means to lose a teacher. And I'll share that video with you right now.
There is a fine statement in Pirkei Avot. Rabbi Elazar ben Shmuel Amar Yichovod Talmidecha Chaviv Alecha Keshelcha Uchovod Chaverecha Kamora Rabach Umora Rabach Kamora Shomayim. Rabbi Elazar ben Shmuel said, "Let the honor of your student be as dear to you as your own. Let the honor of your colleague be like reverence for your teacher. And let the reverence for your teacher be like your reverence for heaven." Rabbi Rabinovich was fastidious in observing the first two of those principles, and we, his students, aspired to the third, because we knew that having a great teacher is as close as we get to heaven. In this city of refuge that is this world, he was our Rav. He was our life. Now we weep, for our teacher has been called to the Yeshiva Shel Mala, to the Academy of Heaven. May we find the strength so to learn and act and teach that he lives on in us. To his family we say, Hamakom Yenachem Etchem B'toch Shah Avalei Tzion V'Yerushalayim. May Hashem send you comfort among all the other mourners of Zion. And we say to ourselves and to our generation, Yehi Zichro Baruch. May his memory
We can now say about Rabbi Sacks what he said about his teacher. He was our Rav. He was our life, and now we weep, for our teacher has been called to the yeshiva shel Mala. May we find strength so to learn, to act, and to teach, so that he lives on in us. To his family, we say, Amakom Minachem Etchem, Toch Shar Abelit Zion V'Yerushalayim. And we say to ourselves and to our generation, Yehi Zichro Baruch, may his memory live on as a blessing. I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight, and take all of your wishes and all of your brachos and all of the charges that you left us with, all of the speakers tonight, and really take them to heart to continue to learn from Rabbi Sachs and to grow with Rabbi Sachs's teachings. I hope in some way that our learning from him and our learning by him helps to give an aliyah neshama to his neshama and shemayim, that he'll be a melitz yosher for us and for our world, so desperately in need of guidance and of teaching for many years into the future. Thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you only well and a Shavua Tov.